I'm going to avoid doing what a lot of videos do, which is talking about the topic just to add on runtime, because let's be honest, you pick this video knowing what the issue is that I'm talking about here. But for those of you who somehow didn't, maybe because you got here by autoplay, I'll explain things quickly. There is a growing frustration with what appears to be a worsening trend in television and streaming media, which is that television and streaming seasons often end up being around 8 to 10 episodes long, with years between seasons, instead of the 20 plus episodes of yearly seasons that was far more frequently the case. Now, there are certainly several reasons for this, but I'm going to focus on one here because it reflects something that applies to other sectors of the economy as well, and is a concretely inescapable problem, barring one and only solution, which a lot of people will be incredibly upset about when I say it. The problem here is a dynamic known as the Baumol effect, which is about why it is that costs of services tend to go upwards even as consumer goods costs go down. In the 1960s, William Baumol and William Bowen looked at the fact that wages of those in the performing arts, say those playing classical music, have been going up since the 19th century, despite the fact that it's not as if musicians have become more productive in playing music. One important thing to keep in mind is that real estate costs have absorbed huge amounts of, and in some cases essentially all of the wage growth we have seen directly through housing, but also through everything else that needs to be produced and distributed on real estate. That particular problem is beyond the scope of this video, though. Just keep in mind, this is how wage growth can have all the effects that this video describes without workers ever actually experiencing the benefits of wage growth. Put simply, playing music is not, in fact, the only thing most musicians are capable of doing. They can work in other jobs in other sectors. So in order to keep them playing music, you need to pay them more, which naturally means the cost of music keeps climbing upwards. As for the reason that wages keep going up in other jobs those people could take, it largely comes down to the fact that those other jobs have grown increasingly productive due to advances in technology that did not apply to performing arts and services in general. That sentence right there is a Chekhov's gun that's going to fire later in this video. Anyway, this all means that falling prices in goods, where technology does advance productivity, actually ends up correlating directly with making the costs of services, especially like the creative arts, going ever higher. This, you might say, ignores that businesses don't increase wages just because productivity has gone higher. But it doesn't. As even if wage increases have to be fought for by workers, the expansion of productivity means there's more space for wages to climb while keeping businesses open. This is the other side of the coin of the idea that inflation is just a product of companies hiking up prices due to their market power. Ultimately, it still remains the case that the space in which prices can be forced downward by antitrust policy is still limited to actual productivity. All of this is to say that even if you manage to abolish capitalism, so 100% of the benefits of increases in productivity went to workers and or consumers, the dynamic of increasing productivity driving up compensation, and therefore costs where there isn't a comparable increase in productivity, is still inevitable. It's also not as if the average person complaining about suppressed wages or companies jacking up prices even wants to go as far as fully abolishing capitalism anyway, so that's almost immaterial. To bring it all together, of course, shows are seeing shorter seasons and taking longer time between seasons and often of less quality because it's more expensive to get labor to do more, faster, and or better. By labor, I don't just mean it's more expensive to hire people. I mean, it's also harder to get away with working people to the bone. They can pack up and work in a more productive sector in which they can get higher wages and or better working conditions. Let me repeat something again, because this is very important to keep in mind for everything that's about to follow. Even if the profits of the rich were not in the way, this problem would not only be inevitable, it can literally only get worse as productivity in other sectors goes higher. The act of increasing material productivity in goods production necessarily strangles production in services, particularly the arts. That's not even accounting for the substitution problem on the demand side, where physical goods getting cheaper relative to services necessarily makes them more attractive to consume in the place of artistic services, strangling art even more. Or the fact that those who remain in the arts as a profession are more likely to be producing inferior products due to a lack of compensation to keep in higher quality candidates, strangling both production and people's appetite for that production. Now we're about to get to the part where I mention the only solution to Baumol's cost disease. Here, I'm going to kind of betray a promise I made at the start of this video to leap directly into the meat of the topic without just talking around it. The reason for this is because I want to get out some judgments about those who will react negatively to what I'm about to say ahead of time. Because if I just jump to saying it, well, people will get too upset to listen to anything that comes afterwards if they don't just switch off the video. I think, perhaps, the single biggest obstacle to seeing improvement in the world around us is not actually the greed or ineptitude of political, social, and economic elites. To use a metaphor, a shark is going to be a predatory animal, no matter how much you want to shame it. They, for the most part, benefit from behavior that's negative to the rest of society, so they engage in it. But, in my opinion, the most important source of the problem is a stubborn consistency of which the general public wants to have its cake and eat it too. How people will often complain about the things they hate, but then get even more upset about the only logical solutions. This situation here is, in my opinion, one of the single greatest examples of that dynamic. So let's be clear here. What I have described so far in this video is a problem that is inescapable. It's a problem that will still be here forever, getting worse, even if you get rid of all the other reasons that cost, quality, and or frequency of service goods, like, as used for the hook of this video, television and streaming shows, gets worse and worse. So if you don't like the coming solution, you frankly need to shut up forever about the problem it would address and suck it up. That is an entirely acceptable response. The issue comes in wanting to whine about the illness after refusing the only remedy to Baumol's cost disease. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to what the remedy is. Earlier in this video, I pointed out the tendency of increasing productivity to not really apply all that much to the arts and knowledge and service in general, Chekhov's gun. It is now time for it to fire. As it turns out, this absence of productivity improving technologies has, since the 1960s, suddenly and rapidly become no longer so true as a consequence of the information revolution. Computer technology has increased productivity in art services. Music got synthesizers. Animation and special effects got computer-generated images. But most recently, in the field of arts and the service and knowledge sector in general, artificial intelligence. If you want to see a return to longer seasons and less time in between them in television and streaming, finding a way to eat the rich would buy some space for a while. But the only way out, at the end of the day, will be increasing productivity in the sector, and therefore successfully making use of AI to improve the creative process. Now you might say, okay, I hate AI and I'm fine with arts as a career shrinking towards nothingness, relying increasingly on people's hobby production of it. That's okay. I mean, that would basically eliminate some sectors of artistic expression because, believe it or not, there's a whole lot of drudgery in the arts that people only engage in because it's a career and is not exactly fun and is not exactly something you would donate your time doing. For example, I don't think every single animator or writer is thrilled about never actually ever getting to produce anything for themselves and just carrying out other people's vision for what would be for free. It's the notion that people would just trade their time doing this for each other has all the functionality of a pyramid scheme. You're not going to get 100 different people to donate their time to carry out 100 different visions of 100 different artistic ventures, if for another reason than they literally could not live long enough to do so. But if you're fine with that, that's a coherent position to hold. Now, someone might also hold the position of not wanting Baumol's cost disease to swallow art and other services as careers whole, while also being against any use of AI in the creative process. And that's okay too, in a way, as long as we accept that everyone that still holds a position after all of which has been pointed out in this video is, without an exception, an idiot. If you think that the way in which companies have applied artificial intelligence to the creative process is often, perhaps even overwhelmingly crappy, sloppy, and to replace talent with technology, never mind the resource constraints behind the use of artificial intelligence, but accepts ultimately the solution is finding a way to get better at doing all of that, probably by addressing other issues in our economy. For example, those related to the power held by a wealthy elite that necessarily cares about nothing else than their own profits, then congratulations, you have the objectively correct position. As a quick add-on before this video comes to an end, I want to bring up a sentiment that I've seen very often, which is one that's not necessarily against all AI, but is against its use in creative ventures, bemoaning that it isn't just applied to doing drudgery or tasks that are very difficult in the health sector. Baumol's cost disease means that AI productivity advancement necessarily strangles labor supply in those without such advancements. So, to save art from productivity increases of artificial intelligence, there needs to be productivity increases inside of the arts themselves. There's also an ironic caveat to the Baumol's cost disease. If technology in a sector gets to a point where it's so automated that all jobs in that field are eliminated instead of just becoming higher paying, that does free up labor for other sectors, breaking out of the cost disease problem in that circumstance. But that also necessarily means that you are, in many cases, eliminating high-paying jobs with automation, which is another thing people are exceedingly mad about. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.